And welcome to episode 58 of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. On this edition of the podcast, I'm going to break down for you and review Season 3 of Black Lightning, give you some information about how the show did in its third season, and look ahead to the future of the show. Just a reminder, we are in the middle of this pandemic, so I'm going to try to increase some of the content, individual episodes on each topic. That way you get a little bit more content for you, as a lot of the CW shows are wrapping up their seasons in the next few weeks. So we will give you some thoughts and perspective on those shows, as well as some other Marvel news, as Marvel's schedule has been impacted by the pandemic. But for this episode, we're going to review Black Lightning and its place in the CW lineup. So let's open up a call and get started on episode 58 of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. So Season 3 of Black Lightning has come to an end. It was a 16-episode season. The significance of that is this is now the second straight season that Black Lightning has had 16 episodes. And what I find interesting about that is that it seems to me that the producers of Black Lightning, while they made an increase in the episode order from year 1 to years 2 and 3, from 13 to 16 to 16, the show is still having to find an audience. And I think that while season 3 has actually been the better of the 3 seasons, I think that the audience that they've lost from seasons 1 to 2 to 3, they have not been able to show they've been able to get back. And that, bears itself out in the numbers, which we'll get into in a little bit. But substance-wise, I thought the show did a very good job this year of tying up a lot of loose ends, filling in a lot of gaps, and also getting a little bit less dramatic when it came to the personal lives of some of the characters. Look, I understand the CW has a long history from all the way back to its time as the WB of embracing the young adult drama element of shows, but as an individual who's in his 30s now, I've become more disenfranchised with that style of television than I even was when I was younger. And part of it might be because of my age, part of it might be because of my evolving interests as I watch television. But I can tell you from a very personal perspective, I felt seasons 1 and seasons 2 were just unnecessary in the ramp up of the personal drama in people's lives. At some point, there's a difference between character development and let's dig deep into why Jennifer likes or doesn't like fill in the blank, or let's dig deep into why Anessa has all these relationship dysfunction. Okay, at some point it's annoying. All right, let's just keep it real. Also, we finally got away from some of the more ambiguous elements of Jefferson Pierce and his ex-wife, wife again relationship. At some point, Lynn is finally his wife full term. And I think it took a crisis in this instance, a crisis in terms of not just the crossover event, but also the occupation of Freeland in order to force them to kind of come together as a family. And I think that's what I appreciated most about this season of Black Lightning, is that they were finally a full functional family at times. And they had to have these horrible things happen to them to force them into that understanding. I think it was interesting to see the development of Jefferson's relationship with his daughters, the evolution of his relationship with his wife, the evolution of the relationships, the family as a whole, to realize how much they needed each other to survive a lot of things, despite everything that happens in the season. I did appreciate the fact that they did allow for a little bit more finality when it came to certain characters moving forward. For example, while I didn't love it, the death of Bill Henderson, who at the time was the head of the police department and also Jefferson Pierce's good friend, I think allowed for some clarity when it comes to the seasons moving forward, because realistically, if Freeland is no longer occupation, it would just go back to status quo. You got to have a little bit of mix up and a little bit of drama moving forward and a little bit of what if with the show. Also, the revelation that Tobias could still be a threat in the future for the show, I think is very interesting for the show. Even though I couldn't stand Tobias's role in the show in season 1, I think he did a good job of developing in season 2 and recalling it in season 3 and really showing his relevance in the entire mini universe that is Black Lightning overall. I think Cress Williams does not get enough credit for the incredible job he has done owning the character of Jefferson Pierce / Black Lightning. I think that he has proven himself not just as a lead role and a lead character on a television show, but as a guy who can carry different elements of said superhero character. Because what makes superhero characters important to people is, can they identify with them? Can they align with them? Can they embrace them? Are there elements of their character and their personality and what they're going through, what they're dealing with, can they identify with it? And I think that Cress Williams has done an incredible job with Jefferson Pierce at making him human, but also making you root for him. I think that at times you look at his daughters, Jennifer and Nessa, and you realize they're younger versions of him, but they lack the experience and the understanding of the world as he does. And even though he himself is not so proud as to think he knows it all, he is strong enough in his convictions to actually stand for what is right. One of those things being he doesn't kill people. And I think that's a great common thread throughout the show's first 3 seasons. I thought it was also interesting the development of Agent Odell from being just a outside character to be a common thread of a lower level villain in terms of a superhero show. While villains like Gravedigger and the Markovians were kind of like the big picture villains, you had a smaller picture version in Odell and Painkiller that I thought was very well fleshed out and very well done. The one thing I didn't like about the story of season 3 was, at some point, you're telling me no one ever asked any questions. I feel like watching this show and now seeing what we're going through with the COVID-19 pandemic, it makes it a little bit less believable that people are not at least questioning how on earth an entire city goes on a government lockdown and nobody thought to ask any questions. The story that they gave to the public about how there was a disease outbreak in Freeland, and that's why the government had it on lockdown, just didn't seem plausible, especially with there being troops who are not American on U.S. soil camped outside of Freeland itself, and no one says anything about it outside of that. Furthermore, why at any point did Black Lightning never call on any of his super friends? I felt that it was a real waste to have this unification of these universes. Now, Supergirl, Flash, Black Lightning, Batwoman, they're all on the same Earth, and at no point did anybody turn around and say, wait a minute, Freeland is on lockdown. We just talked to Black Lightning. He's from Freeland. This doesn't add up. Let's dial him up. Black Lightning, what is going on over there in Freeland? Do you need some help? Or at some point, Black Lightning didn't just call someone and be like, hey, could somebody check on this for me? You have people with government connections, like Supergirl show cast, or you have people who are these incredible scientists, like the cast on The Flash, or you at least have the idea that all of these characters are in the same universe. They might have some sort of connectivity beyond just he happened to be on the crossover show. I thought that was a massive, massive waste throughout the end of the show, especially with him telling his family, Jefferson Pierce, oh, by the way, I was involved in an incident where hundreds of thousands of Earths all died. Now we have one planet. And nowhere did his family turn around and say, hey, Dad, you have super friends. Why don't you call one? I felt that was a huge, huge loss of the show, because if you go by the television viewership numbers, just on linear television for Black Lightning, you realize that the show had a small initial bump at the mid-season end event, but when it came back from its hiatus, it had a drop-off. Then it had an increase. It found this influx of viewers almost out of nowhere, and then it just kind of peaked. It plateaued. It didn't increase. It didn't grow, and in fact, the final episode saw a small dip in terms of viewership, not just on linear television, but on all platforms. It's like people were almost tired of where the show was going, and I think it was a complete fail by the CW to not have some sort of follow-up to the Crisis event. To flesh out the numbers as an example for everyone here, the mid-season finale for Black Lightning averaged right around 900,000 total viewers. When they came back from the Crisis event, they had a drop-off of 400,000 viewers. Now, they ended up growing from that point from episode 10 to episode 15. They gained about 200,000 to 300,000 more viewers across all platforms. But then the season finale dipped by about 11%. You compare that to DC Legends of Tomorrow, who had a specific bump from the post-Crisis episode where they had actually over 1 million viewers, one of the few times in the last few years, for their season debut episode, which was immediately attached to the Crisis events. And then they had a small drop-off of about 150,000 viewers, but then they started building up again to gain them all those viewers back, and then they leveled out around 800,000. So DC Legends of Tomorrow was able to build some momentum. A show like Black Lightning was unable to build any momentum and had a massive drop-off of about 40% of their viewers because of, one, the gap in time that the CW insists on with their mid-season finales to when they resume the seasons in January, but also because realistically there was no connective tissue between their massive crossover event, which is supposed to draw some connectivity and draw audiences to the other shows. It totally failed in that sense for the Black Lightning show. As I said, when you lose 400,000 plus viewers for a show, that's a significant loss. And yes, you did gain some of them back. You plateaued with a total loss of close to 20% of your viewers that you had compared to your December 9th mid-season finale. We saw, for example, on an episode of The Flash, Diggle shows up and works with The Flash on an episode. That's a follow-up specifically from Crisis. We saw a moment in Supergirl where they say and talk about things from Crisis. We're seeing an ongoing storyline going on in the second half of the Flash season as a direct effect from Crisis. So for Black Lightning to not even have a specific follow-up element from Crisis was a complete loss. And listen, I understand that there's a great problem when it comes to crossing over characters from show to show. I know there's a lot of scheduling conflicts. I understand that for a show like Black Lightning, it only has 16 episodes compared to the number one show on the CW, for example, The Flash, which is far and away the most watched show, and that show has more than 16 episodes ordered. At some point, you have to start treating Black Lightning like they're part of the big leagues and not just a B-level show, because I think Cress Williams has proven his performance of the character and the growth of the show storytelling-wise that it's more than a B-level show, that it belongs in the same category as the other CW shows. Listen, I understand that all shows are losing viewers, but at some point, as people have less things to watch on television and less options when it comes to live entertainment, reality shows are going to start dying down because of the pandemic. We have no live sports to watch. At some point, you have to, as a network, take the bull by the horns. And I feel like it's something that CBS and ABC and Fox and NBC are trying to do. And I don't see that same effort from the CW. I think there's a little bit too much of a reluctant, well, we have the audience that we have. We don't have to push any harder for more of an audience from the CW brass. Now, I don't know if that's an order from people above them. I don't know if that's a collective, poor effort by the network and their management, or if there's some other larger reason why, despite the fact that a lot of these shows are losing viewers on linear television and they're having modest gains on the digital side and on the DVR playback and on the on-demand side, that they're still renewing these shows. There has to be something that they're not telling us about the viewership, unless they just feel like they're making enough money and they don't really care about the viewers. Maybe there's an assumption that they're making so much money off of these shows in terms of advertising and promotional from those elements that it doesn't really matter what the viewership is. I don't have access to their to their book. So I don't know how much money they're making versus losing, but I assume there has to be some other reason aside from, viewership that they're keeping these shows on the air, especially considering that The Flash, which is the most watched show on the CW, for some reason has maintained a high level of viewership despite losing the 18 to 49 demo strength that they had. There were a long time that demo was very strong in their corner, and now they've lost a segment of that demo, but they haven't lost as many viewers from one week to the next. So it'll be interesting to see moving forward what happens with Black Lightning, because to me, Black Lightning should be paired with The Flash. I feel like there should be a little bit more interconnectivity between the two most family-oriented of the shows. There's been no 100% confirmation about the future of the Arrow spinoff show with Catherine McNamara, Oliver Queen's daughter, but I do know that Black Lightning has been renewed for another season coming up. So I'm working under the assumption that Black Lightning is still going to be a part of the slate. My question for Black Lightning is, can they grow the audience next year? Can they get a good lead in and not keep being switched from night to night? I think the CW has mishandled them a little bit. They have not capitalized on the fact that The Flash has a family element to their show, Black Lightning has a family element to its show. I think that while the show has grown and gotten better and evolved, I think there's been character development. I think there's been a ironing out of some of the more strained and pushed and overreached elements. It is no longer trying to be the Black version of anything. I don't feel like Black Lightning is trying to be anything that it's not anymore. I think that Black Lightning has found its own footing. I think that after season 3, we have some finality on some specific storylines. And I think we're able to move forward with some new creativity and some new ideas. And I'm looking forward to see where it takes us. Unlike shows like Supergirl and Batwoman, I'm not very frustrated with the content of the show. While I was frustrated in year 1, I think that in seasons 2 and seasons 3, the show has grown and developed in a way that I'm more comfortable with the direction the show is going in. While I'm not crazy about how they've handled the Khalil character, and I think there's times that Jordan Calloway's character, Khalil Payne, is a little bit whiny and complaining, I do enjoy the fact that the character is still part of the show. I think that James Remar's Peter Gamby has done a great job at being layered and being nuanced while also being forward and a dynamic presence on the show. I think that Christine Adams-Lynn Pierce going through the whole issue with having addiction and withdrawal was a great thing to factor into the show and a great exploration by the writers of its impact on a family such as this. I just hope that they get back to some sort of normalcy next year, because you can't go on past this year with an idea such as an occupation and such abnormal circumstances. I think it was a good idea for one season to play along with that idea, but anything that extreme moving forward, I think could be a strain on the storytelling. Unless they get really creative, which then again, I have to wait and see. I think overall, I give Black Lightning season 3 a thumbs up. The season did a good job tying together a lot of loose elements. I think they did a good job at storytelling, and I think they did an even better job at allowing Cress Williams to solidify himself as a bona fide A+ lead actor on a television show. And I think that his portrayal of Jefferson Pierce has grown and evolved and matured in a way that I don't know if the other CW shows have done. We have to wait and see what happens with Batwoman, but I know for a fact that with some of the characters on Supergirl, while Melissa Benoist has to carry the entire cast on Supergirl at times, I feel like the other actors, such as Christine Adams, such as James Remar, such as Jordan Calloway, actually have, and Bill Duke as Agent Odell, have done a good job at solidifying their places in this mini universe inside the CW overall Arrowverse. I just think the biggest thing for Black Lightning moving forward is you got to have them involved in a crossover that's going to give them a little bit more oomph and a little bit more follow-up when it comes to the substance of the show beyond just, hey, Black Lightning was in crisis now, have a nice day. You got to give us a little more than that. I understand there's a lot of scheduling conflicts that comes to a lot of these shows, But I'm hoping the CW doesn't just sit on their hands and hope for the best with this show, because as we move forward in a world where there's going to be more and more content available on things that are not just regular linear television, the CW has to differentiate, and Black Lightning is an opportunity for them to differentiate, not just because of the characters on the show, but because of the style of the relationship of the characters on that show. You know, what a show like Black Lightning has is the traditional nuclear family, and The Flash doesn't have that. The Flash has a family element to the show, but it's not the traditional nuclear family. Batwoman is very entrenched in its agenda when it comes to socio-political topics. Supergirl still has a tendency to be a little preachy. I think Black Lightning could draw that line and make themselves a little bit more, when it comes to television, a little bit less of a message and a little bit more of an example of what a show can be when given the opportunity to go in that said direction. I don't have 100% confidence that it can do that just because of the CW and the writers and directors, people involved in the network, but I can always hope, right? Thanks for listening to this edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast. If you have any thoughts and comments on the show, be sure to drop it in the comments section below, or hit me up on Twitter at Josh Hennig. Hennig spelled Hennig. If you enjoy the show, hit that subscribe button, follow. You get us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Overcast, or whatever platform you listen to your podcast on. Coming up in the next few episodes, we'll be doing more reviews of the CW shows as the shows start wrapping up, along with a little bit big perspective on the Marvel Cinematic Universe. As we see with the COVID-19 pandemic, there are some delays specifically to movies and release dates in different shows that have halted production. So we'll get into all of that in the upcoming episodes in the coming days and weeks. I'm your host, Josh Hennig, and I'll catch you right here for the next edition of the Mutant Blitz Podcast.